Pakjavan dikutne produžena je ponudori kamaro seriali taro interview. Roma inclusion has been a European priority for years, supported by governments, philanthropies, and major institutions. Yet the gap between commitment and lived reality remains wide. Tonight we speak with Kinga Rethy, Executive Vice President of the Roma Foundation for Europe, one of the key architects shaping strategy behind the scene. Dear Kinga, welcome and thank you for accepting the invitation to be tonight here with me.
Thank you for having me, Adriano.
So, as the Executive Vice President, you sit at the center of the strategic and execution. Let me ask directly, what is the biggest strategic mistake Europe has made in Roma inclusion over the past decade?
Wow. How much time we have for the interview? Long? Look, I mean, I'll try to pick one or two because I think Europe has made a lot of mistakes. And not necessarily by what they didn't do, but also what they did do and it didn't work. And of course, when we say Europe, who are we talking about, right? So are we talking about politicians, society, educators, ourselves? So I think possibly, if I have to maybe summarize it, I would say one of the biggest mistakes is that Europe played lip service to Roma inclusion. There was a lot of talk. There has been a lot of talk, a lot of buzz, a policy here and there. We had a decade of Roma inclusion, which was supposed to be focusing on systematic change affecting Roma as well as mainstream societies in which Roma live. In many ways, this was a lip service, right? It didn't actually result in systematic change for Roma communities. I think there have been a lot of band-aids over these years. And, you said the last decade. It's very hard for me to pick out only the last decade. I'm talking the past 20, 30 years since I've been very closely following the development of Roma empowerment in Europe. Certainly, there have been opportunities. If I think of the EU inclusion, for example, the accession process in which Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, back in 2004, the accession happened. But already from 2001, 2, 3, there was a lot of back and forth with the governments of these countries. So the Commission, the EU officials in charge of these talks, negotiations. There's a lot of discussion about the necessity of these governments to take the Roma question, the inclusion question, much more seriously. Every single country was called out on their Chapter 23, right, which is the functioning of the rule of law, the inclusion of Roma minority. Every single country was called out. And there have been programs, projects here and there, but real policy change that led to systematic change, it didn't really happen. And that leads me to, again, if I have to say one thing, it would probably be the lack of political will and understanding of what it means to take Roma inclusion seriously and to do it long term.
In 2025, what concrete result can you point to that show the Roma Foundation for Europe is moving from vision to a real impact?
So look, our work rests on many years of previous work, right? If I pick 2025, because that's what you asked me to do, I would say that moving the needle from having mostly moral arguments into a very concrete argument on, for example, competitiveness, labor shortage, economic spheres, right, industry strategies. We're looking at Roma inclusion not as a cost for Europe, but rather a solution for Europe's labor shortage, for example. So moving out from the sphere of social policy and moral argument and going into very concrete debates about economics, about industry strategy, about skills and reskilling and jobs, that's certainly something that was much more prevalent in 2025, and there are very concrete steps that we've done for that. So we have published research on evidencing what are the short-term gains and returns, as well as the long-term macro gains for the society on having Roma included in labor shortages. So I think that's one major achievement. And of course, it doesn't stop there, right? Because that is still somehow in the sphere of narrative and discussions and debates. But then the next thing is showing workable models, proof of concepts, solutions that can easily be adopted by others as well. Certainly working through our partner institutions on education and employment and entrepreneurship. I think that's also something we started in 2025. It started earlier, but we see, I think, this year already some of the results of that work.
The Roma Foundation for Europe brings together education, culture, entrepreneurship, and advocacy. Is this ecosystem truly coordinated?
Define truly. What do we mean by truly coordinated?
Really coordinated to bring some change, to drive systematic change.
I think if I understand that question correctly, perhaps it's about strategy, right? Are we aligned on strategy? So does the right hand know what the left hand is doing? There's no other way to do this. And I think if I think back to your first question, what is a mistake that Europe has done? It's also that, have the countries or the ministries or the policies coordinated? Was there a strategy, a large, of course, there was a European framework strategy on Roma, and then you get into the details of why it didn't work. It creates a very different picture. I think we have done better on certainly on coordinating, aligning our objectives. There has been, I mentioned the proof of concepts. There has been a lot of work, joint work between the economic sphere of our network, the education focus, the research and advocacy focus. So backing up a lot of what we do with research and data and evidence-based discussions. Can we do better? Yes, we can always do better. But for example, there isn't a question anymore for us whether we need to coordinate over this. You cannot do education for the education's sake, right? So when Roma Education Fund recently launched a new strategy. Of course, their strategy focuses very much when it comes to educations and skills and vocational training and investing in young Roma who are able to take up jobs that are potentially created with the work that the Roma Entrepreneurship Development Initiative Ready is doing. But at the same time, REF has negotiated several employment partnership agreements for which, through its own skilling and reskilling programs, prepares people. So it's a combination, and there's also culture, right? We don't have culture for the sake of culture and decoration. The European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture is investing heavily in creating a cultural infrastructure, which focuses on anything from strengthening Roma pride and identity, all the way to making sure that Roma artists, filmmakers, painters, poets are present in the mainstream fields, right? ERIAC launched this year the Romani Pen, which is backed up by the International Pen Organization. Roma filmmakers are present in Cannes, in Berlin, in the Berlinale, in Rotterdam. So there's also ERIAC, for example, has a training on the Holocaust. Obviously, the materials, the educational development, the curricula happens together with the Roma Education Fund. So I can go on and on. I think there are quite a few synergies, while of course each entity, with their own thematic goals and strategy, stays very much focused on how that particular segment is adding to this larger complex Roma inclusion question.
Many Roma activists argue that Roma voices are still underrepresented in the high-level decision-making. Is Roma leadership strong enough at the top, including within your own structure?
Look, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm not a Roma. Obviously, I am in a leadership position. So this is a question that I both expect and like very much. And I like it because it takes me back actually to when I started working on Roma issues, and that's almost 30 years ago now. And anecdotally, I can tell you this. There was a board meeting in the Open Society Foundations. I was working with the board back then, and my job was to prepare an overview, a paper of what the Open Society Foundations is doing when it comes to Roma. And I had already worked, I wrote my master thesis on Roma, so I had a little bit of understanding or involvement in this work. I said, okay, this is easy. This is something, I mean, I know who the people in the Open Society Network working on Roma issues. I'll call them, I'll talk with them. It's something I'll do, with ease. It took me 2 months, and I sweat blood in writing the paper, because it turned out that there isn't necessarily the kind of coordination at that point that you were asking, for example, just a few minutes ago, about how we coordinate. And with all the good intentions, people were doing different things, not necessarily coordinated. So knowing this, the board of the Open Society Foundations decided to create a coordination office. And I had gone on maternity leave for a few months, and I came back, and I was told that, okay, so here's this office, and you will lead it. And I said, I mean, Open Society has been investing in Roma leadership and scholarships for almost 2 decades at that point. You clearly can find a credible, legitimate, professional, expert Roma leader to lead this office. And this is something that was not coming necessarily from me. It was coming from George Soros and his vision about Roma leadership. So fast forward 30 years, not 30, 25, 20, 21, 22 years later, we have a network in which we have 5 entities led by Roma. And they're not leading it simply because they're Roma. They're leading it because these are extremely credible professionals with years and decades of expertise and legitimacy. So there isn't a question of, is there a strong leadership? Absolutely, a very strong Roma leadership. What is my place in that? Look, I mean, I have my 25 years of working in this, but I don't think that's necessarily the only legitimacy, right? It's also that I work in this as somebody who supports the Roma leaders around me. My job is not to be in conversations about Roma politics and Roma policy. It's not because I don't have an opinion. I do, and my colleagues know exactly what they are. And I raise them and I voice them, but it is not, we are luckily, right, at a time when we have very strong, very good Roma men and women doing that kind of work. Now, I strongly believe that non-Roma do have a place in this work, in this network, right? because of our own expertise, because of our own professionality. But there are some things that we do and some things that need to and must be done by the Roma leaders. And I think also absolutely our role is also to invest in the next generation, in investing, growing Roma youth and talent who can, by the way, come in and take these leadership positions. And if we do things well in the coming years, there should be more and more institutions, Roma-relevant, Roma-led institutions, because it will be institutions which, at the end of the day, will bring on systematic change. People are important. You know me. I'm a big believer in supporting people and development and talent. But it will be institutions which will continue to be present in mainstream conversations, in conversations with the Roma community, presence in the Roma community. People make those institutions at the outset, but it will not be always the same. It shouldn't be always the same people. So it's absolutely key that we continue having Roma leadership. And I'm hoping we will have more and more Roma women in leadership positions.
Does this be a call for our young Roma Romi to join the networks and to work on something with a vision and idea for a common and collective results for all the Romani population? Looking ahead to 2026, what strategic shift are you personally pushing for inside the Roma Foundation for you?
Strategic shift. I'm not sure if we need to push for a strategic shift. We have plenty of work to do on the proof of concepts. As we continue the conversation about the relevance of economic inclusion, it's also true that we have to back this up with scalable models, proof of concepts. We started some, right? We need to continue to do this. Also because it offers a very credible and very legitimate way for others to take on these models, besides funding, to actually take them and implement them further. And what I'm thinking here is, for example, the Complementary Education Center that the Roma Education Fund launched this year. This is something that is very community-based, in partnership with municipalities. The first one was launched in Bucharest. There's a second one being launched in Bucharest, but there are plans to launch another one in Prešov in Slovakia, then in Chutor Izari in North Macedonia. So I think these are important places because it's not only about the children, it's also about the parents, the families, the community having a place to be together and have, for example, Roma-led mentoring happening in these communities. So I think we have quite a few models that we need to continue to test. That's certainly one. Another one is to continue bringing the economic argument into the mainstream debate, discussion about Europe's economic issues, labor shortage, industrial changes. And I have another one which we sort of started this year already, but I think 2026 will be the year when we intensify it. And that is when it comes to diversifying our funding. I think that in the world we're living in now, the work we do is certainly, and this is not just our Roma work, but generally civil society and the not-for-profit world is not necessarily high on the funders' ideas. And I think that it's super important that we continue to do this work, and I think we need to diversify our funding. So one idea, and this is something something we already started this year, is incubating some business ideas. So putting our foot a little bit into the for-profit world, to not be afraid to be more entrepreneurial when it comes to figuring out our own long-term sustainability. So certainly next year, I will be focusing together with the Roma Entrepreneurship Development Initiative with Rethy on incubating ideas and starting some of our own businesses, of course, with the idea of the profit. Whenever that happens, obviously it won't happen the first year, returning that profit into the network and into the work that we do in the different thematic industries.
I know you a little bit personally, and I know that you are a big optimist for everything that you're doing. But what will be the top priority for you for the next year from the objective and from the strategy of the Roma for Europe?
As I mentioned, certainly continuing the economic argument and providing evidence and research-based data on why this isn't really, does Europe want to do it or not? Europe has to do it. I'm hoping that we get to a point where this topic comes even if we are not present in the room. To me, that would be an achievement. Right now, when we enter a discussion, whether that's a political event or any discussion at the European level, high levels, so these doors are somewhat open at the moment when it comes to discussing the future of Europe in terms of economic terms. But then, empowerment is in enforcement, right? So it's not enough to have the conversations. Though the outcomes, the results, the agreements will have to be implemented. And that goes, of course, into systematic change and policy change. So I'm hoping that we move the needle further on this. I'm definitely hoping that these discussions will come naturally, even if one of us are not there in the room to remind how important this is. And certainly, as I mentioned, the continuing with some of our models that will need to be tested. I am personally also very vested in making sure that we have an organization and a network which is functioning very smoothly, that it's an agile and adaptable organization which is able to come up with things very quickly and implement them very quickly. So to me, focusing on that kind of agility, digitalizing further, automatizing some of our processes, and spreading the mantra on what works in terms of our own operations and efficiency, but spreading it within the networks, that's something that I'm personally very vested in.
Which empowering of the Roma can transform Europe for you? How do you see?
Look, I'm a big believer of political interest and will. I don't think there's anything you can do without political will and interest. It's I don't have to say to you. I mean, you and I talk about this all the time. What kind of world we live in, and it's not an easy one, right? Whether I look at the political arena or the economic arena, the social arena, it's not easy. It's for our kids, the next years and decades are. I mean, we all have challenges in our own lives, but the challenges, the accumulated challenges that are coming, are pretty grave. As you said, I'm an ever optimist. I think there are opportunities in this, certainly for the work we do. And I think that next year and the years ahead, the political will, together with the economic and the educational focus, but as well, also the societal openness, the understanding that Roma inclusion is not something that is, still somewhere out there, somebody else's job. This is everybody's job, Roma and non-Roma. And we both, Roma and non-Roma, can only benefit from it. If we don't do it, if we don't do this differently on a higher level, on a more natural level, that will also have consequences. So, I went in circles, but it's politics. At the end of the day, it's really politics. And I really hope that also Roma voices and Roma politics and the presence of the Roma political leadership also intensifies over the years, because it's also inevitable to not just have Roma at the table anymore, but actually have the input into where a country is going, what happens in a country where you have, 8, 10, or even whatever percentage of Roma in the country.
So strategy, empowering, transformation, accountability at the heart of Europe's Roma agenda. That was Kinga Rethy, Executive Vice President of the Roma Foundation for Europe. Thank you, Kinga.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching.